As a DC fan, canceled projects are starting to become the norm, so it definitely makes sense that the more digging you do into past animated universes, especially the DCAU, how many things you uncover and how many projects you realize got canceled. But not only that, the very stupid reasons that the studios and the networks justified canceling those said projects, even when they were received very well from audiences that they were intended for. And that's why today we're talking Batman Beyond sequel movie canceled. But before we get into anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. All right. Getting into Batman Beyond Return of the Joker sequel, yes, they did originally have a sequel movie planned. However, it got canceled for some of the stupidest reasons. If many of you remember the animated film Batman Beyond Return of the Joker, it brought back Batman's most iconic villain and had him face off against the new generation of Batman, Terry McGinnis, and it also showed us flashbacks of Batman and the Joker's final battle when the Joker did inevitably meet his demise. However, if any of you saw the movie when it was released, you might have actually seen the edited edition. You see, when this movie was first being conceptualized and was first being created, the network and studios decided that the movie was too dark for a couple of reasons. Partially because of something that did recently happen that was very tragic, so it did have influences on this movie, and so they had to go in and make certain changes to the film. But what were these changes, and what were the negative effects? Well, the negative effects are really simple. They did not account for the extra costs to edit almost an entirely different version of this film. So instead of taking into account why your budget increased, they just went with their same calculations for what this film should have made in profit, going off of what they spent originally. Again, a huge mistake when you have to almost double your budget because of the amount of editing and the amount that they essentially had to redo. But what were some of these changes? Well, there were actually a lot of the biggest moments in this film. We see the Joker's return in epic fashion. He is there with his version of the Joker gang, and we see one of those members of the Joker gang trying to challenge the Joker, and in this moment, it is supposed to show the Joker showing how superior he is to today's villains, so he kills the villain who does question him. However, in the original film, he is supposed to just simply shoot the villain and he dies right then and there. You actually see him laying on the table with a giant rod sticking out of his chest. However, for the edited version, this was drastically changed. Instead of him being shot, they do still utilize a gun. However, when he presses that gun, the bang flag comes out and Joker gas is then expelled. And then we do see the villain laying there on the table with a smile on his face. This is actually a common thing they did throughout Batman the Animated Series and the New Adventures of Batman, because they couldn't have the Joker just executing people, so they would just use this fate as a way to show that the Joker is still cruel. However, he isn't technically killing people, although this is pretty much a fate that is death, because we really don't ever see anyone get cured of this, at least not till much later. And aside from Bruce Wayne and the one guy from Static Shock, I don't believe we really see it ever. There's the one guy in the Mask of the Phantasm who gets infected by the Joker toxin, and I believe he ends up being safe by the end of it. But again, considering how many different people that the Joker did affect with the laughing toxin, you'd think that you would end up seeing way more people being cured of this. However, they're not. So it definitely ends up being a fate that is in some ways worse than death. But that's not the only change that the movie had to make. You see, at one point, we see the Joker invading the Batcave, a very climactic moment to show that the Joker knows Batman is Bruce Wayne. And by this point, us as an audience doesn't understand that. We don't know why the Joker knows Bruce Wayne and Batman are one and the same. But this was supposed to be a huge moment for the movie. And although it is still in the film, they do change it to the point where all of the writing written around Wayne Manor and in the Batcave was originally not going to be purple. They changed that because it was originally written in red, signifying it could have been written in Bruce's blood, which for an animated film, considering the time in which it came out, is very graphic. And this is probably one of the only changes on this list that I actually agree with, and I definitely see why they had to change it. Going from purple writing to the ambiguous red that could have been blood, I don't think offers that much more to the story. However, some of these other changes definitely do take away from the story, in my opinion. Like, almost every time you have a character punching another character, instead of getting to see the contact be made, there was almost this white flash as if you were getting a picture taken that goes over the camera to somewhat hide and mask the fact that these two characters are committing violent acts against one another. And to me, that really hurt the film. When you watch the uncut version, it is something that is significantly more noticeable when you do go back to the edited version, and it's noticeable in a very bad way, in my opinion. Some of the other changes were surrounding Batman's final battle with the Joker in the flashbacks. Batman throws a knife in one scene and the Joker dodges it. It cuts a curtain in this scene. This was just entirely cut, except the one part that wasn't cut was showing the curtain and showing that it is still cut. So although it does present a continuity error in how did that curtain magically get cut, this was also in an abandoned Arkham asylum, so it definitely could make sense to have different ragged curtains and things that are torn up. So this isn't an inherent issue, in my opinion. It's not something that is overly noticeable until you specifically look for it. Then it definitely does become more and more apparent. Some of the other things were during their final battle, the Joker slices Batman's chest and stabs him in the leg, which could partially contribute to why he uses a cane in the future, why his health maybe isn't in the best of states at that point. However, this was all cut as well. And instead of showing any of this, they just showed the Joker punching Batman, and that's how he got the injuries he got. I believe they also even removed the knife from his leg because you couldn't show Batman being stabbed like that or having a wound like that. And this to me takes away from the scene a ton. I feel like it being that brutal signified how serious and how monumental that scene was. And not only that, it was a great moment to show the Joker getting the upper hand over Batman, because Batman underestimated the Joker for the first time in a while. And why did he underestimate the Joker for the first time in a long time? Because of what just happened to Tim Drake, because of what Batman was forced to just witness. And not only that, he just got confirmation that the Joker knows he is indeed Bruce Wayne. So because of all of this, it would all make sense for him to be caught off guard, and us getting to see that and getting to see the Joker truly get the upper hand over a bruised and battered Batman was an awesome moment. And I feel like this is one of the moments from the uncut version that is far superior to what we got in the edited version. And that being said, the other major change is the Joker's death. In the edited version, the Joker just gets knocked into some type of chemical thing, gets electrocuted, and that is how he dies, versus in the uncut version, he does get shot by Tim Drake, and then we do see the rod sticking out of his chest, and then he says something about, that's not funny at all, and then we see him die on screen. A lot of that was obviously cut out. After he is electrocuted, it essentially ends there, and they don't show much after that. This was all because it had to be censored for the network. It was viewed as too dark. However, because of all of this, the movie did not do well in their quote-unquote box office. See, it was a direct-to-video movie, so they only could account for DVD and VHS tape sales, and because they didn't take into account all the extra money they had to put into the film just to do a separate version of this film, they calculated it overall as a huge loss. So although it was critically acclaimed and the audiences very much so enjoyed the film, they could not go forward with the planned sequel. However, they did still in some way give us what the sequel was intended to be, and that happened in the Justice League Unlimited episode Epilogue. You see, the movie was supposed to explore the connection between Terry McGinnis and Bruce Wayne, the fact that Terry McGinnis was indeed a clone of Bruce Wayne, how that actually came to be. It was going to be essentially what Epilogue ended up being, except much longer. We were going to get more development between Dana and Terry McGinnis, him making that choice that we did see in the episode, whether to leave her behind or to propose to her, if he can truly balance being Batman and Terry McGinnis, him not wanting to turn out as lonely as Bruce Wayne, and that would have been a key factor for the film. This would have propelled the character of Terry McGinnis to trying to be more than just the Batman, and it would have shown the audience that Terry McGinnis really did break the cycle of someone being Batman and being cursed to a life of solitude. This would have shown a version of Batman that was able to become happy. However, some of the changes changes from the epilogue episode. Instead of it being Amanda Waller that was the one behind all of the cloning with Terry McGinnis, it would have instead been Selena Kyle, and she would have been the one to take Bruce's DNA. I don't know how she would have taken the DNA. I know in the epilogue episode they do make some innuendo jokes, and I definitely feel like since this is Catwoman, there would be even more room for more innuendo. But let's just say, obviously, because Batman leaves blood almost all over Gotham City, she would get it that way, and let's not do anything weird. With that being said, aside from that, we don't really know anything else, as it was canceled pretty early on during their developments, and all they really had as far as ideas or storyboards was essentially everything that we saw in the epilogue episode, except switch Amanda Waller for Selena Kyle and take out virtually everything with Cadmus. So everything with Cadmus would have been changed and altered to reflect it being Catwoman who was responsible for this. As for who the main villain would be, we really don't know. Obviously, we could have seen a return of Blight, as he is someone who had a very ambiguous demise on screen, but then later returned in comics. So that could have been a really cool villain to see in that. One of the other really cool ideas that I saw online for this movie is, since Tim Drake was introduced to Batman Beyond in the first one, tying up this universe with an introduction from Dick Grayson would have been absolutely amazing. Somehow the cloning tying back to something in Bloodhaven, maybe there is another connection to the main villain that Nightwing has, and then we get to see Nightwing and Terry McGinnis have some really cool interactions like they do in the tie-in comics. Either way, I'm a huge Nightwing fan, so that would have been something I would have loved to see. However, aside from that, I don't necessarily think I would have preferred this sequel movie and this being the end for Batman Beyond. I think what we got in Epilogue was truly such a beautiful end to the character. I know it is kind of split on if people really like the cloning decision or dislike the cloning decision. I personally am a fan of it. I think it's a really cool concept, and I don't think it takes away from the character of Terry McGinnis. However, either way, whether they did the sequel movie or they gave us the epilogue episode that we ended up getting, he was inevitably always going to be a clone of Bruce Wayne, so that inherently wouldn't have changed. It would have just been about how they presented that to us and who was the one responsible. And to me, it's way more fitting that Amanda Waller had a full circle moment, going from being an adversary of the Justice League and someone who pretty much despised every League member, including Batman, to someone who now has the utmost respect for Batman, so much so that she believes the world can't survive without a Batman out there, so she takes matters into her own hands and ensures that a Batman will always live on. That's always been a really cool concept to me, so that's why I feel like her being the one instead of Selena Kyle definitely is just way more fitting. I think the only benefit to this sequel movie is if we would have gotten more interactions with the extended Bat family, specifically Nightwing, and if you found different ways to include him in this story. But let me know what all of you think. Would you have preferred this sequel movie to what we got in the epilogue episode? Let me know in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And I'll see all of you in the next video. Goodbye.